Hello, Theo. Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm
Uh,
fine. Hello, Antonio.
it is always a pleasure to be working with you. And you remember, we met more than 10 years ago. We have been in several interesting meetings in Lisbon University in a conference, and again in Innsbruck with you, and in London University. Okay, and many other things in virtual environment. But we have discussing. You are, let's say, a dreamer about quality, a dreamer about multimedia, a dreamer about making good education process. And this is what I would like to listen your opinion and your experience concerning these aspects. Stage is yours, Theo.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Antonio, for your kind invitation and your introduction. It's always nice working together with you. It's such an inspiring climate, and there are these exhilarating ideas about the future of education, at least about options. Because sometimes if we look at the landscape of education and the educational systems as they are developing and evolving, it's also difficult to be aware of that because processes are going very, very slowly in many places, and it's not just that we have enthusiasts about innovation in education. We have lots of reform resistance also, at least in our countries, and it's slow and small steps.
It is not only in your country. From my experiences all over, I should divide teachers in three big groups. One is people very updated, very qualified. Another is people that are not qualified, but they will to be qualified. And then there's another one, they are not qualified, they don't want to be qualified, and please don't talk about technologies and new methodologies because they don't want to listen about that. And that is the problem. You see, the problem today, or let's say the main challenge today, is not a big evolution that happens in our methodologies and technologies. Is a big evolution of our clients as well. Our students are demanding more and more new methods, new technologies, multimedia, distance teaching and learning. And this is very difficult to answer from many of our colleagues. What do you think about to change this?
Well, yes, I have my thoughts about it, of course, and I think there are many aspects about this theme. On the one hand, we have these changes in technologies, but also we have changes in cultures, and that's the point where I try to enhance the debate as far as I was reflecting on your conclusions. Um, yeah, thank you for the slides and the overview. I made some points, or at least I tried to make a few points, starting with the first ones. Just looking at the conclusions of your debates as far as you had it recently, making 9 points all in all. And I think if we look at the first one, at the first slide, when it's about the teacher's need to involve, teacher to blend it, the B teacher or B tutor. In German you would, or you could easily have a word play, a word game on the blended teacher, because it's got a double meaning.
Mm-hmm.
It's also, it's like blended and blinded.
Mm-hmm.
And media are often the blind spots in teacher education.
Mm-hmm.
Media education and digital media hardly show up in the curricula. There are small programs evolving. Um, Many colleagues are saying it's a kind of crossover theme which has to show up in every subject, and there is no special subject to it. It's got meaning and importance all over the place. And to some extent, I think that's true. But on the other hand, if it's all just a crossover thing, it happens nowhere, and all the points you're making are then challenges or are then claims, but which are not taken seriously enough. So if we look at these 9 points, being an expert in a scientific area, on the one hand, I would agree immediately. On the other hand, you also have these provocations from people like Sugata Mitra, for example. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if you've heard of him or seen
Yep.
his
Yep.
videos on TEDcom, and
Yeah. Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
more or less claiming that that all you need is this school in the cloud and a nanny, a kind of a figure, encouraging people to go on and to further develop their ideas and their skills and everything, and that nanny hasn't to be an expert in any field,
I, I
and that's
should say that it would be a compromising situation because it's not equal for in all levels. If you have a focus in different education levels, you should first of all teach how to learn and after let our students make their constructivist way. Because before they learn how to learn, they cannot do it. They are not prepared. And this is a very important step for us teachers to give them the view of the way on which they should walk through. Otherwise, they will lose their time, they will lose their patience, and they get frustrated and they cannot go more in for the future. And this is very important. After that, it's no problem because the only problem, and I would like to listen your opinion too, is today we have a huge amount of information. And the most difficult is to manage with this information, to select from what is good to what is wrong and decide which is the way you should take. What do you think about this amount of information, huge amount of information that we have to teach our students how to manage?
oh yeah, yeah. Just 1 second before I answer on that one. Um, in order to avoid misunderstandings, I'm not agreeing with what Sugata Mitra is
Okay.
saying. It's just I count it as a provocation, and as a provocation, it's very important that we have
Yeah, it
challenges
is.
like that. That encourages discussion and going into details and having clarifications exactly at the in respect to what you said. What's the task when it's about themes like learning to learn and what's the purpose of it and what are the strategies and the processes of individualization in context of a concrete arrangement or theme. And as to the information, um, I'd say we have always new claims about the amount of information. We had books in the 70s already about the theme, about this mass and masses of information and how to deal with it and how to distinguish qualities and levels of information. And the discussions about information management are going on now for decades. And I think it is a task at all levels, and especially in schools, of course, we should take notice of these issues as how can we deal and manage with it. But I think what we have to learn is to distinguish between various medial forms in which this information shows up, to distinguish the clusters, the patterns, and not just see the quantity, but learn how to read patterns, how to distinguish the relevance in a certain given context. The
But this
importance.
is extremely important to give that impression to our students, to give them the highlights, how to choose between A and B, between to choose us between white and black. This is extremely important because our students became confused in this moment with so much information available.
Yeah, 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 that's true. But at the same time, um, there is no information per se and no knowledge per se. It's always in a given context. It's always in a given life situation. It's always given and being performed in a certain media cultural environment or as a part of an information ecology, as another metaphor is used in this context. And what we have to, to, to learn and to realize is those differences between various informational ecologies and knowledge ecologies, and to see how we can and recontextualize um, special information which is of interest for one reason or another. And if we are dreaming of strictly decontextualized information, then it's all just a mess. Then it's very, very difficult to distinguish qualities and relevances and relevance patterns all over the place. Then it's just a more or less arbitrary thing to decide.
But this, in the other hand, this is as well a challenge for a teacher. And,
Absolutely.
and this
Absolutely.
challenge, you see, in 2 decades ago, we have presence and distance learning. Today, we have a mix of presence and distance. And you can be more present using as well complementary tools and complementary applications to use online, or you can be in a distance course with a presence like we are now in a virtual classroom and have other things that you can use on demand. This means that a teacher today, I'm not saying in the future, I'm just saying today, he should be an expert, not only in one scientific area that is his expertise, but as well he should have a toolbox with a lot of know-how how to use technologies, how to use new methodologies in all education levels, in primary, in K-12, or in a university or post-graduation. We can as well say that in our days, the 4 years of university is an introduction for 40 years of permanent continuous learning. And this is the challenge for the future. So a teacher should be a blended teacher, as you agree or not. Can you give us your opinion?
Well, my my answer is clearly ambivalent
Yes, I
because
know.
it's very clearly ambivalent because it's depending on the interpretations of blended.
I don't mean blind. I don't mean blind.
You don't blind spotted or deluded or something like that. You know,
Yes.
not in that sense blended. And the other thing is, those blends. There are these models and concept how to
Mhm.
develop blended types of e-learning, for example. And in my opinion, many of them are missing the, the relevant structures of the subject in relation or as related to the students and the learners. What are the relevant structures they bring in, coming from their cultures, from their cultural experiences, from their mediated life worlds? And if we are not aware of those competences and cultural experiences and taking notice of those mixes and those blends easily go a road that's not of big importance importance for the learners. It's just then kind of a
But
theater that's going
don't,
on, but not really of importance, not
but
really in a meaningful sense. And that's where I have my doubts that the toolbox alone is of importance. We have to decide about issues. Why are we doing this? What's the purpose of it? We have also to discuss the purposes, why we are meeting, why we are getting together in presence or on screen or whenever. I mean, it's just a different kind of presence. We are there. If it's
yes,
just automatism that's going on, you
yes,
know.
but I have always said that technology without methodology is just technological noise, not pedagogy. So we should be very careful when we are using technological process. It should be very well involved in methodologies. Otherwise, it is no help at all. It's just distracting. It's just making a big, big trouble on education process. But
Yeah,
from what I know, you are, let's say, involving in methodologies and technologies, and you have a huge experience in this. So um, I would like you to show a little bit more of your toolbox and what is inside of that you are using permanently.
we probably have to have another arrangement that I really can prepare for what you'd say. What's my toolbox? The
I
first
know it's a very big toolbox.
well, you know, I'd rather say it's about enhancing those questions. You know, if you think about technology in a historic sense, technologies meant something different. In the ancient Greek, technology has got much more to do with dealing with not only certain kinds of problem, but it was closer to arts, for example, than it's now.
Mhm.
And nowadays, it's a rather narrow understanding of technologies. Even if we are talking about technologies of the self and not just of the digital technologies. And I think that's the theme we have to bridge. You know, those technologies of the self, as Foucault, for example, to some extent has discussed them, in relation to educational ideas, purposes, and the use of media in those procedures. Um, Hopefully an aware use of it. And it's those enhancements can be we can manage or we can encourage the history of them in the sense that we have a long history of ideas that the technologies will bring the innovation and the changes in the
Not
educational
necessarily.
systems.
It needs should be very well involved with methods. Otherwise,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
yeah.
something to do.
But
Technological noise.
if you look at in long-term observations at the theme, you can easily find that it's like it's a hope and it's a set of techno-promises, not only as related to education but also to health. If you look at the health
Mhm.
systems and the technology in the health system, we have the
But
same ideas.
sometimes, but sometimes technology appears as well as a starting engine for new methods, and that is positive. And combining the new methods with the new technologies, that is a step forward.
Um, yeah, it can be a step forward, and it's my idea is that we don't let's say that the idea of a technological determinism is not very helpful. If you take it as an initiator or as a relevant context for cultural developments, um, and as a vice versa procedure, then I think we come closer. You know, changing ideas, changing technologies, changing lifestyles and forms of life in a more philosophical sense also. So that's where education sometimes lags behind and often has ideas which are way back in history not being open for new forms and new ideas. And
You are leading a process in multimedia in Innsbruck University and with a very positive results. And could you give us your opinion about this and some highlights as well?
yeah, well, there, there are too many. If I look at the time we have for this conversation, but what I wanted to point out, you find a lot of statements, and very soon there is another open access publication coming out where we discussed these issues as related to the question of why media education and what for media education. And in this debate, the technologies are part of the game, but not just the main thing to focus on. It's always the issue, why are we doing this? Is it just for economic needs? Is it about employability or functioning or adjusting people by means of learning technologies to
I
have
should
them?
say
Sorry?
I should say that mainly because teachers should be the leaders of the process. They should not be followers and say, "Oh, today's students they know much more technology than teachers." No, teachers should be updated to lead the process, and you can involve only with with the education process if teachers are the leaders in all aspects. This is my point, and that's why we teachers need to make our evolution in this process, methodologies and technologies.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it can be very fruitful if the students are the leaders, um, pointing out new themes, relevant themes, innovative ideas,
And make challenges.
challenges for a teacher,
Yes,
especially if you're lecturing
very positive.
nowadays. If you look at examples, you have a lecture hall and 2, 3, 4, 500 students in there. Some of
Mhm.
them, um, let's say, focusing on their WhatsApp stuff. Some others using search engines and just looking up the key terms the professor is presenting and then asking very sophisticated questions about that. And in
Mhm.
that context, you have a new challenging situations how to deal with that.
You pose this slide with a lot of interesting issues. Can you give us words about it, please?
Yeah, this slide is the result of a long work um, when we discussed the developments of action-oriented learning and especially in the context of education and media education. There is a long history to it um, in the sense of learning by doing, in the sense that you learn a lot if you, for example, do your own video clips on a subject that's relevant for you. Also in this context of storytelling, for example, as it's used all over the world now, those contexts in schools, at universities, but also outside universities. But on the other hand, there is another context um, where where people are learning by themselves in a different way. It's the context of media activism, where you have lots of
Mhm.
examples where people are dealing with issues important to them and to society as a whole, which are not taught in school, which are in contrast to school. And graffiti is a good example. When you talk about graffiti education, it's often a moral education, giving warnings to parents and to pupils and students just not to do it, but not learning much more out of it, or just making use of it in a very special wall, and not grasping the sense of all these activities which are going on since centuries and in many places all over the world. So what we discussed is what's the relation of these different types of acting in the context of learning and education, and why couldn't those groups learn from each other, especially the formal education from media activists, um, bringing in, let's say, a little bit of hacking culture into the schools and not just leaving it outside or banning it from schools in order to enable a deeper understanding. And then that's, of course, partly about disobedience, about transparency and intransparency, what's going on with the NSA, what's happening to our data, what's the issues of autonomy in dealing with our data, what's the currency we are paying when all say it's for free. Um, all those issues should be part within the educational game. And
Yeah.
however you put
Yeah.
it, however formal education can learn from media activism, at the same time, um, it's always um, the truth of the educator when we are talking about education towards truth. And that counts the same in the context of action-oriented learning, of learning with digital technologies and methodologies, of whatever type, critical type of education you are aiming at. Education towards truth, as my colleague Josef Mitterer says, is always education towards the truth of the educator. And I think this is a kind of a meta-claim um, which helps to discuss um, very all kinds of situations in educational contexts when we are having a preference for certain tools or certain methodologies for certain themes and constellations or material, the learning material we are contextualizing in classrooms. We have to be aware of this.
But in fact, there are an important aspect. It is that the difference in education is based mainly in the difference of the educator. And you know that if you have a good methodologist and a good teacher, the results in his class is totally different if the teacher is not so well prepared, it's not such a good communicator and so on. So it's very important that the teachers should be very well prepared, very well updated to make, let's say, a good leaderance. And teachers should be the leaders of the process. Otherwise, we will be lost. Theo, we are about the end, and you proposed two more conclusions.
Yeah.
This is one of them, and another one is concerning the to the future oriented education formulas. Can I listen your opinion about this?
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is a, you know, there are different takes on what we might call education, and what's really underestimated in our contemporary world. That's the work, the hidden work, I want to say, of algorithms. And I think we we have to reflect on that and the role when we are bridging individual and cultural memories. And that's what education is about, at least to some extent. You know, we learn something, we learn how to learn, we develop basic structures and redevelop them, we transform them through educational procedures and relate to cultural memories and have traditions on the one hand and innovation on the other hand. And to develop flexible options at the crossroads of bridging these processes means to me being open for different educationalization formulas. That means not giving just one answer and having one idea of a purpose of the education, or as in my other chapters about mobility and media education in the digital age I pointed out, Hermann Veit described as the different formulas being used throughout education. We now have a situation where we need a manifold of those formula we need spaces for them to cultivate them, and having special flexible options. Is, as Norbert Bachler says, digital world of flux. And in that sense, education is not aiming at the well-rounded personality which knows everything. It's rather a bricolage type of education where sometimes bits and pieces come together.
Let's go to a final question. And about the future. And about the teacher in the future, in 20 years, in 50 years. What can you see what it would be the future in front of us, and how would be the challenge for the teacher in that period?
I'm not sure about that, because if you look at the last 20 years, nobody had an idea about the importance of mobility in all the different versions of cultural, individual, cognitive, geographical forms of mobility. It's not just about the devices and the handhelds and the mobiles we are using nowadays, but it's about changing structures, intertwined structures of mobility coming together, including forms of enforced migration, which are on top of the whole debate challenge education as well. So all these processes have not been foreseen short time ago. And how can we talk in a meaningful way about 50 years from now? I think it's too far away. If you have, let's say, 5 years or 10 years.
Even 20 years, even 20 years is too far.
Even 20 years.
Even 20 years is too far.
I agree, Antonio.
I should say that the future, it should be a permanent challenge for all of us, teachers and learners. And this challenge, and who will be flexible, creative enough to overpass all the difficulties, will be the winner of the process.
Well, to some extent, it's my last conclusion. I want to say, when we look at this new flexibility, or hopefully flexibility, also in anthropological terms, not just in educational terms, but really in deeper anthropological terms, one lesson we have to learn, I think, is that all knowledge is in one way or another context bound. It's contextually bound. And if we, that's my last conclusion, the conclusion number 3, if we are overcoming the myth of distributing education, that education can be distributed, or knowledge can be transferred in a technological sense, and realize that the different forms of knowledge are always contextualized, and we have to be aware about those contexts and to learn about those contexts, then I think we have a chance to deal with all those challenges, at least in the near future. That's what I think we should focus on.
Thank you very much, Theo. It is a pleasure to be with you and discuss with you as always, and it was a very interesting debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Antonio, for the invitation.